Welcome to Reno's World Podcast. I'm your host, Reno Rains. Today, we're diving deep into the chilling details of a 4-day exorcism that ended in tragedy. We're talking about the infamous exorcism case where reality and the supernatural collided in a way that's both baffling and haunting. If you love exploring the unknown, smash that like button, subscribe, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. In my world, the truth is always out there, waiting to be revealed. Let's get into it. In January 1993, in the remote rural town of Antwerp in Victoria, Australia, a tragic and bewildering event unfolded at the farm of pig farmer Ralph Vollmer. His 49-year-old wife, Joan Vollmer, began exhibiting bizarre behaviors that defied explanation. Neighbors later recalled that Joan would dance erratically outside, use crude language uncharacteristic of her, and even mimic animalistic behaviors. Rather than attributing these changes to a mental health crisis, Ralph and his close-knit circle of religiously devout neighbors and friends, among them John and Leanne Reichenbach and a spiritual guide expelled from her former congregation, convinced themselves that Joan was the vessel for 10 demonic entities. They believed that these evil spirits had overtaken her, twisting her very nature. Over the course of 4 harrowing days, Joan was subjected to what the group fervently regarded as an exorcism. The method was as shocking as it was methodical. Joan was forcibly restrained, tied to a chair with her own stockings, and deprived of sustenance, while her husband and the group attempted to squeeze the demons from her body. According to the accounts, they used a hammer to shatter her personal belongings and even obliterated her cherished flower beds, actions meant to purge any lingering traces of the unholy presence. At a critical moment, the group escalated their efforts by pressing relentlessly on her head, chest, and particularly her neck, aiming to force out the malevolent spirits they claimed resided within her. Despite their conviction that Joan would be miraculously restored to her former self, the ordeal ended in tragedy. In the oppressive heat of the Victorian outback, her body, found later in a state of advanced decomposition, bore the unmistakable marks of physical abuse. Autopsy reports indicated that the force applied during the exorcism had fractured her thyroid cartilage, leading to a fatal cardiac arrest. Police were finally alerted after a significant delay, and when they arrived, they found the group calmly going about their daily routines, their meal having been interrupted only by the horrifying aftermath of the exorcism. Court records and news reports from that time confirmed that the legal system did eventually take up the case. Ralph Vollmer, along with his accomplices, Leanne Reichenbach, 28-year-old David Klingner, and 22-year-old Matthew Newski, were charged with the wrongful actions that led to Joan's demise. However, the judicial process took an unusual turn. Although a pathologist testified that the pressure applied to Joan's neck most likely caused a fatal cardiac event, he also admitted that other medical conditions, such as an epileptic fit or an asthma attack, could not be entirely ruled out. Consequently, the court's verdict reflected this ambiguity. Some of the accused received suspended sentences or minimal jail time, while others were given brief custodial terms, leaving many in the community and the media baffled by what many perceived as an insufficient punishment for such a brutal event. Ralph Vollmer maintained throughout that the exorcism was performed in accordance with what he believed was divine will. He even publicly declared that Joan's spirit would rise on the day of her funeral, a promise that proved tragically unfulfilled. The exorcism, carried out with an almost ritualistic fervor, was documented in a variety of media, including several newspaper accounts, true crime podcasts, and detailed articles, all of which have cemented the case's status as both a mystery and a modern-day parable of fanaticism. The accounts detail that before the exorcism, Joan had been admitted to a psychiatric facility on a prior occasion, suggesting that her erratic behavior might have had a clinical explanation. Nevertheless, her husband and his circle dismissed any notion of mental illness in favor of a supernatural explanation. They identified specific demon names, terms like the Spirit of Filth, Princess Joan, Princess Baby Joan, and Legion, which they believed were inhabiting her body. Every detail of the exorcism was recorded with a chilling precision, from the tying of her limbs and the denial of nourishment to the aggressive physical manipulation aimed at dislodging the purported entities. Media reports from the time, including those from renowned publications and investigative podcasts, meticulously catalog the sequence of events. According to these records, after enduring a prolonged period of physical and psychological torment, Joan's suffering culminated on the fourth day of the ritual. Her body, still clothed, lay motionless and unresponsive as her tormentors, convinced of their impending spiritual victory, awaited the resurrection that never came. The tragic aftermath saw her family and community grappling with the horror of what had transpired, while legal authorities struggled to determine an appropriate course of justice. Analytical examination and critical reflection. As the layers of this case are peeled back, one cannot help but notice the dizzying interplay between fervent belief and clinical reality. The vivid details, detailed descriptions of restraining techniques, the physical assault, and the subsequent medical findings are uniformly recounted across multiple reputable sources. There is little doubt that a brutal, non-consensual, and ultimately fatal exorcism occurred at the Vollmer farmhouse in 1993. Yet, while the chain of events is corroborated by autopsy results, court documents, and numerous journalistic investigations, the explanation behind the tragedy remains mired in controversy. The claim that Joan was possessed by demons is rooted in the religious and superstitious convictions of those involved. Testimonies from Ralph Vollmer and his cohorts are peppered with supernatural attributions, a language of possession that resonates more with ancient exorcism lore than with modern psychiatric understanding. This is further complicated by the fact that Joan had previously been treated for mental health issues, a fact that many contemporary critics argue was overlooked in favor of a dramatic, otherworldly explanation. Forensic evidence does indicate that the force applied during the exorcism likely led to a fatal cardiac arrest, with the fractured thyroid cartilage serving as a grim physical marker of the assault. However, the possibility that pre-existing medical conditions contributed to her death introduces an element of scientific uncertainty. The ambiguity in the cause of death, whether it was solely the result of physical trauma or compounded by a medical episode, remains a critical point of debate. This gap in definitive medical evidence opens the door for skepticism about the supernatural narrative. In essence, while the exorcism itself is a documented event, the assertion that demonic possession was the underlying cause is less substantiated by empirical data. Moreover, the legal proceedings that followed further complicate the picture. The relative leniency of the sentences, suspended terms, and brief incarcerations suggests that the court may have taken into account not only the physical evidence, but also the cultural context in which these events occurred. The defendants appeared to genuinely believe they were acting under divine instruction, and their statements, such as claiming, "The Lord told me," indicate a mindset that diverges significantly from conventional criminal intent. This factor may have influenced both public perception and judicial outcomes, leading to a verdict that, while legally sound, leaves lingering questions about accountability. Critics argue that the supernatural explanation might have been a convenient cover for a deeper neglect of mental health issues and a failure of community support systems. The tragic case of Joan Vollmer serves as a grim reminder of what can happen when extreme beliefs override compassion and medical reasoning. It also challenges us to consider how modern society interprets and deals with unexplained behavior, whether through the lens of spiritual warfare or through the more empirical approach of psychological evaluation. In evaluating the evidence, one must acknowledge that while the exorcism took place and resulted in Joan's untimely death, the claim of demonic possession lacks independent, verifiable proof. The dramatic narrative of 10 demons, as described by those involved, remains a matter of belief and cannot be conclusively validated through forensic science or psychiatric assessment. The inconsistencies in witness testimonies and the inherent subjectivity of supernatural interpretations further weaken the claim from a rational, evidentiary standpoint. Conclusion: truth or fabrication? Based on the evidence presented, it is unequivocally true that Joan Vollmer was subjected to a 4-day exorcism that culminated in her fatal physical collapse. The accounts of the ritual, the subsequent forensic findings, and the legal proceedings are well documented by multiple independent sources. However, the assertion that her death was the result of demonic possession is not corroborated by objective, empirical evidence. It is instead rooted in the fervent beliefs of a small, insular community. Thus, while the event itself, the fatal exorcism, is factual, the supernatural explanation for her condition remains unproven and is best regarded as a reflection of the participants' mindset rather than an objective reality. In summary, the case of Joan Vollmer is a true and tragic event, but the claim of demonic possession is not demonstrably true when scrutinized under modern scientific and legal standards. Thanks for tuning in to Reno's World Podcast. I'm your host, Reno Rains. I hope you enjoyed our deep dive into the chilling exorcism case where reality and the supernatural collided. If you found this investigation as riveting as I did, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Remember, in my world, the truth is always out there, waiting to be revealed. Stay curious, keep exploring, and I'll catch you in the next episode. Until then, take care and keep questioning everything.